I apologize. My hair is going through a thing right now. Also, since the only, two people who are going to watch this know me, yes, I did shave my beard for the first time in like 16 months. Feels very weird. I can tell because when I walk forward, my chin gets cold. I'm not used to that. But anyway, let's go ahead and begin. As you could probably tell by the title of this video, first off, this is an introduction, and second off, I'm talking about languages. This little video is simply about my experience with language learning, but anyway, let's begin. My first experience with any foreign language would probably just be being alive in America. I probably have encountered some Spanish, but specifically my first formal experience would have been in 2006 when I was 6. My mother enrolled me in 2 back-to-back, I think, summer courses. All I really remember from the classes is I thought that yellow in Spanish was pronounced armadillo, and I could barely understand what the teacher was saying when she spoke English. And I decided, I was like, I don't want to continue doing this. I don't feel like I've learned anything. I know the word for blue and green, and I know armadillo, and that's it. And then the next time I ever encountered a foreign language, in the sense of actually practicing or formally going out of my way to learn a language, was in high school. I began with a very structured schedule because at my high school, that was the purpose. It was so structured, in fact, that quite literally, like your first year there is set in stone. Like, you have to take every class there for the first year, with some exceptions. For example, I chose Spanish 1 instead of French 1 or ASL 1, but I didn't want to learn French because I don't like French. Spanish seems interesting because a lot of people here speak Spanish. I live in America, in case I haven't already said that. And then if I could have done ASL, I just don't have an interest in any languages that aren't spoken. And so yeah, I picked Spanish, and I went into Spanish, and I had a phenomenal teacher. I haven't spoken to him for a long time, but I am a Facebook friend of his, and I make sure to like everything he ever posts because it's always hilarious, especially when he posts about his kid being a kid. I love the teacher. He, in fact, is probably one of the reasons I was inspired to later on go and learn more languages. There were lots of encounters with people asking me questions that I was confused as to why they had. For example, one of my, I don't know what you call it, my catty corner seated neighbors, because we sat in little groups, asked me, I think probably 3 times in Spanish 201 to explain very, very basic English concepts, and he was a native English speaker. Such as he wasn't entirely sure what a verb was, but he didn't want to ask the teacher, didn't know what nouns were particularly, he didn't know the difference between a pronoun and a non-pronoun, just a noun in general. And I explained them, I tried my best to help, although I was a bit confused as to how he graduated from middle school, not knowing those, but hey, not my room to really judge. I just wanted to help because I liked learning languages, and he was a cool person. But anyway, I noticed, stuff like that, and I noticed that basically no one retained any of what we actually went over. There were a few exceptions, like in terms of individuals, but as a whole, as the class, like, we would go over the same stuff over and over and over again, and people just didn't get it. I learned later it's more just because of the fact that I was actually practicing, even though it was maybe an hour a week outside of class, that was an hour more than everyone else. But during the summer after freshman year and between sophomore year, I wanted to practice something else, and I kind of didn't like Spanish anymore. It's not that I didn't like Spanish, but I was just kind of like, this is boring. I want to kind of leave it to school and just focus then. So I decided to do German. I was mostly peer pressured into doing German because one of my friends was very adamant about wanting to learn it. He gave it up later on. And I know throughout the summer I read what I consider all books to fit within 5 categories. The 0th level would be like Duolingo sentences, or like Spot, just where it's very straightforward. Like I ran, just sentences that you couldn't really make a book out of, but they exist. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I got to the 4th level of what I categorize books in, which in this case was Friedrich Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil. Other than the fact that that was the first book I read of his, so I didn't understand any of it, I knew what he was saying because I figured out what the words meant. And, it was a bit of a stretch, but I could read it. And so then I get back to school this next year, and I don't exactly know when, but it had been sometime before December and after October, I realized I know way more German than I know Spanish, but that's in my head at the time. I was like, this makes absolutely no sense. I've practiced Spanish for 9 months, and at this point, probably more like 12 months. And I've practiced German maybe 3.5, maybe 4, probably more like 3. I thought, oh, maybe it's because for German, it was very similar to English, and in my opinion, German's closer to English than Spanish is, although the friend who told me I should learn German would strongly disagree and does strongly disagree. But I noticed this, I noticed this weird divide, and I was very confused. Now, like 2 or 3 years later, by my senior year, I realized that the issue was I was counting by months and not hours, and if I had counted by hours, that had been far more accurate. Because in reality, that one summer of 3 or so months of practicing German, I probably had around 400, 500 hours of practice, whereas in all those 12 months of Spanish, excluding the seated classes, I maybe had 120, maybe 150 hours of Spanish. And that's why I was better at German. I just didn't realize it at the time because I was dumb. And I mean, I am still dumb in many ways. By probably more like the middle, but by the end of sophomore year, I decided I was not going to continue Spanish. I was done with Spanish. The reason for that is, first, the teacher who I had so far didn't actually teach Spanish 3 or 4. But, I decided, I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just practice during summer at some point, and I can get fluent in probably 3 months if I really dedicate myself like I did with German. That never actually happened, and I still keep planning, next summer, I'm going to do it. Just so you know, I'm a sophomore in college now, so 4 years ago would be when I stopped practicing Spanish as part of classes, sort of. But anyway, then that entire rest of the year went by, and I realized by the end of it that I had been focusing way too much, not too much, but way too much on not languages. I was focusing on choir, band, and debate. I put all my focus on those, and I stopped practicing languages, and I thought, it'll be fine. I'm practically fluent in German. So I was like, I can stop practicing it for a little bit, and I'll be fine. For a little bit was not quite what happened. I didn't practice any languages for the rest of school, basically, the rest of high school for 2 years, or more, 1.5 years. And then, like practically everyone else who practiced a language in high school, I didn't know anything anymore. I was confused. I knew, probably 20 words of Spanish and 20 words of German. I forgot how to conjugate in both of them. And, it wasn't so good. So then, I wasted some time, about a year with an X. After that, we come to freshman year of college. I took Japanese 101, or whatever it was called. I'm just going to call it 101 because it's the introductory Japanese class. I got a C in it. It wasn't the worst thing ever. It wasn't the best thing ever. But it reminded me of why I dislike class time learning. Because or more so, I dislike it because no one really understands how to practice for a class. We're not taught how to. We're taught how to practice for a test, and that's it, because that's all that matters. If you pass the test, you pass the class, you're done. If you if you get a high grade on the ACT or the SAT, you're good. So really, they only ever taught us how to take tests. They didn't really teach us how to study, at least for my entire life. I kind of tried to later on, but I'm still terrible at studying because I never had to until probably now, and then all of a sudden I have to do it, and I haven't ever done it, besides for something like a language. I took Japanese 1, and currently I'm in Spanish 1 in college, and once again I realized, wow, learning languages as part of a school is the worst thing ever. Through practicing that and practicing Dutch on my own a little bit, it taught me that learning a language is hard, not as hard as I thought originally, but that most of the people who think that a learning language is just incredibly difficult or they couldn't possibly do it because, say, they're no longer a kid, most of them are wrong. But a lot of people who want to learn a language don't want to learn a language. They want to say that they know how to speak a language. Like, do you know that person, who says they speak Japanese, but you've only ever heard them say, "Omae wa mou shinderu," or something like that? And yes, my Japanese is terrible. I know. But, you hear them only spouting out weird anime references. Or that person who speaks Russian, but anytime you ever hear them speak Russian, it's exclusively saying something like "suka bliat," or, other cuss words. Yeah, like those types of people. They don't actually know the language. They haven't acquired the language. They simply want to say that they know the language and then have learned a few phrases. I fall into that, obviously. I mean, everyone falls into that. It's nature and natural to want to take the easiest possible route until there is a strong need to do otherwise. Like, for example, we don't take the easiest route during war typically. We typically go all in sometimes, unless there's oil involved, and we go in and we just kind of stay there for the rest of forever. So this is the 4th time I've tried to make an outro, or, a closer to this episode. I don't really know what to say. I figured, the best thing to do is explain why you should return. But then I was like, I feel like I'm lying, because I don't think anyone should return. I think you should return if you want to, and nothing I say now should be able to change whether or not you believe that you should or shouldn't. A reason why you should not continue to watch my videos is simple. First off, I'm not going to follow a specific niche. If you only want to watch videos about language acquisition, you will be sad, because that's not the goal of this channel. Other than that, I will tell you why you're wrong, which a lot of YouTubers don't do. Particularly whenever you have a YouTube channel which is focused on a niche, that channel doesn't talk about why that niche is unimportant, and I will, because I think that everyone over-exaggerates the things that they believe are good. Whatever you consider to be normal, you will consider to be the right way to do things. They get there, and then they believe that that's the right way to do things. And I don't think there is a right way to do most things. I think there's a semi-right way, but I think there are particularly only wrong things. Because in all actuality, if you take every claim that's ever been made, more of them are false than true. In fact, I would say that almost no claims are true, other than claims that escape the real. For example, the claim that a circle is a line of infinite points that touches itself and has a circumference of blah blah or whatever, I don't know. But you can name something like that, and you would be truthful in that. And I think those are the only times you can really be truthful. Anything else, you're saying from a lack of pure understanding. So yeah, I don't know. I'm ranting. Here is what this series, specifically about language acquisition, this is something you can expect from this series. How the American education system has ruined the idea of language learning in America. That's not an original video. I'm sure it's been done 100 times. Why anyone at any age could and should learn another language. And then something that I don't think most people will be talking about, and that is why you should not learn a language. And I'll probably dedicate a big chunk of the series to why learning languages isn't really important, especially in the modern era. Most people are trying to sell you a product and saying, "Here, buy this book. This will teach you how to learn a language." And in all actuality, buying the book, I mean, yeah, you might be happy with it, but it's probably worthless to buy. I see lots of stuff where it's, here, buy my course. You can learn how to learn French and blah, blah. I will tell you the way that I learn a language, but I'm not selling you a product. I want to talk about the negatives. I want to talk about how there's a lot of, just kind of selling you a false product. For the most part, the selling of false products comes from the wasting of your time. For example, ranting for 7-8 minutes. I want to talk about how they kind of waste your time. For example, there's a lot of here are blank reasons why you should learn a language. And then there's 5,000 videos, not actually 5,000, but there's 5,000 videos that have the same 7 reasons, or maybe the same 4 reasons, and then 3 that are special. And then you'll have, one YouTuber who's made 20 videos like that, and half of the reasons why are the exact same, or nearly the exact same. Other than all that, I don't know why you should come back. It's up to you. If you like what I've talked about and want to see why I dislike people, go ahead and return. If you don't care, don't. You do you, I'll do me. But with that aside, have a nice rest of your day, and I hope you have fun learning whatever language you're practicing.